Dan Frumkin, Chief Executive of Metro Bank, thank you so much indeed for joining us. I've got a few questions which I'm looking forward to hearing what your answers are. First of all, you are the Chief Executive of a challenger bank. Has the pandemic cemented the dominance of the big banks?
Yeah, it's a great question, John, and one we actually get a fair amount now, both from the press and yeah, I think it's a interesting consideration. I mean, as you know, Metro was formed out of the last crisis 10 years ago, and there's little from this crisis that doesn't make us believe that we're well positioned to move forward post-pandemic. I mean, community banks play a huge role in growing the economy. I mean, we're very focused on SME businesses. We have local business managers in every store. That's going to be hugely important as the UK gets through this cycle and comes out and tries to grow again as a country. I mean, I think we're going to see more startups over the next 12 months than we've seen in any period in the history of the UK. So, we think we're really well positioned. Again, we really focused on communities and customers and colleagues through the pandemic. We were at NHS drop-off points. Every store stayed open throughout the whole pandemic. We delivered cash to those who were having to quarantine. We've done everything we can do to try to solidify our position. And, I am American, which I accept, although I do have a British passport. The reality is that, I fundamentally believe community banks are hugely important to how an economy grows. I mean, the analogy I like to use, which is always a bit goofy, but what I like to use, before Walmart was Walmart, it was a single store, five and dime in Rogers, Arkansas. And it banked with a local community bank, and that community bank helped it open its second five and dime and its third five and dime. And I fully accept that Walmart doesn't bank with that community bank anymore, but it wouldn't exist today if it wasn't for that local community bank. And I think the UK needs more of that, not less.
Right. There were some reports today that the COVID loans, which I think Metro has been a key provider of, are likely to be extended into November. Now, some of those loans, common sense tells us, are likely to go bad. And there are suggestions that perhaps a bad bank might be required to put those loans into. What's your view of that?
Yeah, again, I've seen a lot of the press over the weekend. I've had a few conversations with the UKFI, so I'm pretty aware of what they're talking about. And, the magnitude of this I don't think should be missed. I mean, even Metro, which is, quite a small bank, we did over 30,000 Bibbles loans, over 1.1 billion pounds of lending. I mean, almost 10% of our loan portfolio is now in Bibbles loans. It's a huge undertaking for us. And we fully understand that not all those loans are going to repay. I mean, it's just inevitable that all those businesses aren't going to survive. And I hope, John, that over time, the commentators get in the mode of realizing how great it is that the businesses that do survive. I mean, even if 20% of those loans go bad, that means 80% of those businesses are here to employ people and drive economic activity. And they may not have been without the Bibble scheme. So I do think the Treasury deserves a lot of credit for Bibbles and Sibbles and the furlough scheme. I think they've positioned us well. In terms of what happens in month 13, as we all affectionately like to call it, I think month 13 is going to be an interesting moment. It's the moment where people need to start paying back their Bibbles loans themselves instead of the government. And we fully expect that there'll be a significant amount of defaults. And I know that this collections function has been discussed as the banks trying to insulate themselves, and they don't want to be held responsible. And
this is the possibility of a debt collection agency being set up.
Yeah, and I think listen, I can get how the papers would get in there, and inevitably, RBS's past issues and Lloyd's past issues come up as part of that story, and all of that I get. I don't think that's the core reason, at least in my conversations with people, that it needs to happen. I think the country needs a bit of a utility. I think it needs a collection engine that will treat people fairly and consistently. I mean, the reality is, if I've done 30,000 of these loans across the UK, there's hundreds of thousands of these loans. And the reality is that Lloyd's and RBS and Metro will collect them slightly differently. We're just humans. We will do it slightly differently. And actually, given the scale of the issue, what we really need is consistency for every borrower. And the best way to do that is to create a collections function that's a bit of a utility, where we all sort of put our loans in together and go from there. But there's a lot of room between the lip and the cup before that gets done, as the saying goes.
Yeah. But you're right. But nevertheless, over the past few days, there seems to have been a fairly dramatic increase in the ratcheting up, if you like, of government rhetoric surrounding COVID, because there's fears that there's a second wave, there might be a possibility of further lockdowns, etc. I mean, are the banks strong enough to cope with that? They're better capitalized, we're constantly told, than they ever were before, better than before the great financial crisis. Are they going to be strong enough to cope with a second wave after the extraordinary strains of the past 6 months?
Yeah. So listen, a second wave will be painful. I mean, I think the reality is not only for the personal impact, and we shouldn't lose sight of the, the tens of thousands of people who've lost their lives through this, which outweighs any sort of economic cost, and
Sure.
it's been terrible. But the reality is that a second lockdown, if it were to occur, would be really difficult for the macroeconomy to get through and come out the other side. And banks, we are a macroeconomic play, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we're as good as the economies we operate in, and therefore we need the macroeconomy to be strong. And yeah, a second lockdown would be difficult. Do I think the banks are in jeopardy? I don't. I mean, the amount of capital we're all carrying is significantly in excess of anything anybody carried pre-crisis. And the reality is that even under a very stressed scenario, I'm pretty confident in the banking infrastructure to exist and play a key role in how we grow out of it.
And even if there is a no-deal Brexit, which of course we're heading towards at the moment, there's little signs of agreement between two sides, so on with everything else, the banks might have to cope with being axed from their, contacts with Europe, etc.
Yeah, I must admit, I now dream of a period where all we were talking about was no deal Brexit. I must admit, at this point, in September, we would have all been in full on panic about a no deal Brexit. We would have been like, it is the end of the world as we know it. The economy's gonna, and actually it can't even get airtime because of the COVID situation. Listen, we're a small little community bank. I mean, we're preparing for a no deal Brexit. We've been preparing for some time for no deal Brexit. I think we understand the effect, but in terms of magnitude, a second lockdown significantly outweighs any no deal Brexit economic impact. Yeah.
Gotcha. You talk about the steps that Metro has taken, to deal with this. And as you say, even though you're a relatively small bank, you've been intimately involved in dispersing the loans, etc. Do you think this would be an opportunity, or has it been an opportunity for the banks to regain their good name, which they certainly lost after the financial crisis?
So listen, we refer to our branches as stores. We really try to differentiate ourselves from the UK banking market. And we've really managed to grow to over 2 million accounts and over 15 billion pounds of deposits by being different than the other UK banks. So I like to think that Metro wasn't painted with the same brush as the other banks. And I actually think a lot of the negativity around Metro last year was really, it was own goal after own goal after own goal. I mean, it wasn't macro, it wasn't anything. We just couldn't get out of our own way. And I think our customers really appreciate the differentiated service, the extended hours, the 7 day a week, the dog friendly, all of that stuff that really differentiates us, the store focus, I hope we're not painted with the same brush as the rest of the industry. And to be clear, the industry has a lot of work to do before I think the image of banks fundamentally shifts. Yeah.
Gotcha. One of the things I was talking about to your colleague before we started this actually was, and it's relevant again with the increase potentially of a national lockdown, is people returning to work. And you said, I think at your first half results that I believe it was an astonishing figure. I thought it was only 4% of Metro staff were keen to return to work full time. But you also said you'd actually been in some ways more productive with people working from home. What is the future of that?
Yeah, and John, I don't think we have a firm answer, so we're still working on it. We have a whole return to the office program. Again, who thought you'd need one of those? So we have a whole return to the office program underway where we're looking at cultural issues, we're looking at training issues. I worry about a 23-year-old kid who joins the bank and wants to have a career. I mean, personally, my career advanced over cups of coffee, a pint in the pub, meeting people in a meeting and having a casual conversation. And, they thought I could do basic math, so they gave me an opportunity. I don't know how to do that in this remote setting. So, there's a lot of issues on return to the office. I think fundamentally though, I don't see us going back 5 days a week. I think the reality is it'll be some mix of working from home and working from the office. I think working from the office will feel different too. I think it'll be a collaborative workspace. I think we'll use it to do more cross-discipline meetings. I think it's going to have a very different feel to it than it did historically. But it's early days, and we need to let it play out. And for Metro, the single biggest thing that we have is our culture, and
Mhm.
we need to hold our culture. And that requires us to interact as human beings. And so I'm a bit worried about it. But as you say, I've been stunned with how productive we've been remotely.
Yeah.
This really, really has worked. I've had numerous Exco members join the team who've never been in the office, who've never met people face to face, and they've been wildly productive and settled in the organization really well. The
Mhm.
one trick I'd give everybody who's listening is if this is the way you're working, you need to use it casually as well. So I miss bumping into people in the hallway.
Mhm.
One of the things I do is I actually ring people on Teams randomly. I will literally call them out of the blue, make them turn on their camera, and we will chat for 15 minutes, usually not about work.
Do they like
And
that?
if you don't do that and you stick to just a meeting schedule on Teams, it's not going to work. You need to figure out a way to keep those casual interactions, have a cup of coffee with somebody over Teams, have a
Yeah.
pint after work. You need to do all of those things, even though you're not physically together.
Yeah, I'm with you. Dan, I think that's probably all we've got time for. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much indeed for sparing your time. And I'll let you get back to running your bank. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, John. I really enjoyed it.